Benjamin is a homeless university graduate who can't find a job. He sleeps in the back seat of a battered yellow Danfo bus that he rents daily to hustle as a driver. One stormy night, he picks up Grace, a weeping young woman running away from home in an expensive dress. He doesn't charge her. Instead, he shares his roasted corn, his only dinner, with her and listens to her troubles. A romance blossoms in the shadows of Lagos, leading to Grace becoming pregnant. Kindly like this video, subscribe and share. This means a lot to us as we continue our story. Also tell us which country you are watching from. The air inside the parked Volkswagen transporter, popularly known in Lagos as a Danfo, was thick, a stagnant soup of humidity, stale petrol, and the lingering musk of the hundreds of passengers who had squeezed into it during the day. Benjamin shifted his lanky frame across the back seat, trying to find a position that didn't drive the metal springs of the worn upholstery into his ribs. It was a nightly battle, one he rarely won. At 26, with a first-class degree in civil engineering carefully wrapped in plastic at the bottom of his "Gonna Must Go" bag, this yellow metal shell was the only home he had. The degree hadn't opened the doors the university promised. In a city that ran on connections and nepotism, Benjamin was invisible. He paid the bus owner a daily fee to drive it from dawn till dusk, and his profit barely covered the rental of the vehicle for the night and a meager meal. Just as sleep began to tug at his heavy eyelids, the sky over the mainland broke open. It wasn't just rain, it was a Lagos deluge, a violent assault of water that turned the potholed roads of the motor park into instant rivers. The sound was deafening, like gravel being thrown against the roof. Suddenly, through the curtain of water and the fogged-up windows, Benjamin saw a figure stumbling through the mud. It wasn't one of the usual area boys or a stranded commuter. The person moved erratically, slipping in high heels, clutching a purse as if it contained a bomb. Benjamin sat up, wiping a circle on the glass. A woman. She looked terrified, soaked to the bone, and she was heading straight for his bus, the only vehicle with a faint light from his battery-powered torch. Before he could decide whether to lock the door or call out, she wrenched the sliding door open and practically fell inside, shivering so violently her teeth chattered audible over the storm. Benjamin instinctively recoiled, then froze. The lightning flashed, illuminating her. She was wearing lace, expensive, heavy Swiss lace that shimmered even in the gloom, but it was ruined, splattered with black slush. Her hair, likely an expensive weave done hours ago, plastered to her face. She looked at him, eyes wide and rimmed with red, expecting him to shout or demand money. I just need to wait, she stammered, her voice cracking. Just until the rain stops. Please. I have no cash. Benjamin looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the fear that goes beyond being lost. It was the look of someone escaping. He didn't ask for fare. He didn't ask why a girl who smelled like expensive perfume was hiding in a motor park at 2 a.m. He simply shifted to the far corner to give her space, reached for the newspaper wrapping on the seat beside him, and opened it. Inside was a half-eaten cob of roasted corn and a singular African pear. His dinner, saved for the long night. I don't want money, Benjamin said softly, his voice rough from shouting destination names all day. He broke the cob in two, offering the larger, cleaner piece to her. But you are shaking. You need energy. Take. She hesitated, looking from the charred corn to his face. She saw a scar on his left hand, jagged and old, illuminated by the torchlight. Then she looked into his eyes and saw no malice, only a tired kindness. She took the corn with trembling fingers. Thank you, she whispered, taking a small bite. I'm Grace. Benjamin, he replied, leaning his head back against the window. Leave Grace. The rain will last a long time. That torrential Tuesday should have been a singular, forgotten event, a blurry memory washed away with the morning mud. Yet, Grace returned. She came back 3 days later, not in distress, but with a deliberate, quiet desperation, wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt that looked brand new but cost more than Benjamin's yearly earnings. She found him scrubbing the mudguards of the bus near the Oberland underbridge. Over the next few weeks, the chaotic, exhaust-filled underbelly of the bridge became their unlikely sanctuary. While the city above them screamed with the sirens of convoys and the hustle of commerce, down below, amidst the mechanics and street hawkers, they carved out a private silence. Benjamin discovered that Grace wasn't just running from a bad mood, she was suffocating in a golden cage. She would sit on a stack of old tires while he worked, venting about the suffocating expectations of her father, a man who managed his family like he managed his construction sites, with iron rods and uncompromising blueprints. She spoke of arranged dinners with senators' sons and the terrifying pressure to be a trophy. In return, Benjamin peeled back the layers of his own defense mechanisms. He stopped pretending to be just a rough street hustler. One evening, as they watched the sun dip below the lagoon, turning the dirty water a shimmering copper, he pointed at the pillars of the third mainland bridge stretching into the distance. "Look at column 42, Benjamin said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "The spalling on the concrete is getting worse. If you look closely, the rebar is exposed to the salt air. Whoever signed off on the maintenance contract last year didn't account for the tidal shifts eating the base." Grace stared at him, stunned. It was the first time she had heard him speak with such technical authority, his voice shedding the rough pidgin of the motor park for the polished diction of a scholar. "How do you know that?" she asked, her eyes searching his face. "Civil Engineering, University of Lagos. Class of 2019, he murmured, a bitter smile touching his lips as he looked at his calloused palms. "Distinction. But the bridge doesn't care about my certificate, and neither do the hiring firms without a letter from a big man. So I drive." The vulnerability of that moment broke the final barrier between them. Grace didn't see a pauper, she saw a king in exile. She reached out, her soft, manicured fingers tracing the jagged scar on his left hand, the one he usually hid. The physical distance between them evaporated. The noise of the surrounding market faded into a dull hum as she leaned in, drawn by a gravity neither could resist. It was reckless, it was dangerous, and it was inevitable. There, in the shadow of the decaying infrastructure he was qualified to fix but forbidden to touch, they shared a kiss that tasted of desperation and hope. The romance existed in the margins of the city, squeezed between Benjamin's shifts and Grace's fabricated excuses to her parents. For 3 months, they built a fragile ecosystem of stolen hours. They met in the back of the parked bus during lull periods, or in dimly lit bukas where the steam of spicy goat meat pepper soup obscured their faces from prying eyes. But the thrill of secrecy soon curdled into a nausea that Grace couldn't shake. It started with a sudden aversion to the smell of diesel that clung to Benjamin's clothes, a scent she used to find comforting, and escalated into mornings where the marble floors of her father's mansion seemed to spin beneath her feet. One sweltering afternoon, they sat in a small, corrugated iron shack near Yaba, the air thick with the aroma of frying plantains. Benjamin had saved enough to buy them 2 plates of jollof rice, a feast by his standards. He watched her pick at the grains, her skin unusually pale against the vibrant Ankara fabric of the table covering. She pushed the plate away, beads of sweat gathering on her upper lip, not from the heat, but from a cold, internal panic. She hadn't touched her phone in an hour, despite the incessant buzzing of notifications from her mother's personal assistant. "You haven't eaten," Benjamin noted, his brow furrowing. He reached across the wobbly table to touch her hand, but she flinched, covering her mouth as a wave of sickness lurched through her. Grace grabbed a napkin, pressing it to her lips, her eyes wide with a realization she had been denying for weeks. She pulled a crumpled paper from her purse, a lab report from a private clinic she had visited under a pseudonym earlier that day. She slid it across the sticky table, past the untouched food. Benjamin picked it up, his grease-stained fingers handling the crisp white paper with reverence. He didn't need to read the medical jargon to understand the trembling of her shoulders. "Positive?" he asked, the word heavy, dropping like a stone into the space between them. "My father will bury us," Grace whispered, her voice devoid of melodrama, stating it as a cold, logistical fact. "He has tracked people down for stealing bags of cement, Benjamin. What do you think he will do to the man who did this to his only asset?" Benjamin looked around the crowded shack. The noise of the city, hawkers shouting, engines revving, suddenly sounded like a closing trap. He looked at the scar on his hand, then at Grace's terrified face. The fantasy of their love story shattered against the brutal reality of their circumstances. They weren't just lovers anymore, they were fugitives waiting to be caught. "We leave," Benjamin said, though the conviction in his voice was thin. "I can save more. We can go to the village. We can run." Grace laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "There is nowhere in Nigeria my father cannot reach. He is Chief Badmus. He doesn't just own buildings, he owns the ground they stand on." The extraction happened on a suffocating Wednesday afternoon at the chaotic intersection of Ozumba Mbadu Avenue. Benjamin was inching his vehicle forward in the notorious "go slow," sweating through his shirt as he navigated the aggressive swarm of Okada riders and hawkers thrusting gala sausage rolls through the windows. His mind was miles away, calculating the cost of diapers and antenatal care, when the traffic flow abruptly strangled to a halt. It wasn't the usual gridlock. Two matte black Land Cruiser Prados had swerved against the flow of traffic, mounting the curb with arrogant precision to block his path front and back. Before Benjamin could check his side mirror, the doors of the SUVs flew open. 4 men stepped out. They were not wearing police uniforms, but tight black tactical shirts that barely concealed the bulk of their muscles, with earpieces coiled like vipers against their necks. The atmosphere on the street shifted instantly from frustration to terror. The passengers in Benjamin's bus, sensing the distinct vibration of high-stakes trouble, scrambled out of the sliding door, abandoning their change and diving into the crowd. Benjamin gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He knew, with a sickening certainty, that these were not armed robbers looking for cash. These were retrievers. The leader of the squad walked calmly to the driver's side. He didn't shout or brandish a weapon immediately. He simply smashed the window with the butt of a heavy pistol. The glass shattered inward, showering Benjamin's lap with diamonds of safety glass. Rough hands seized his collar before he could unbuckle his seatbelt, dragging him through the broken window like a rag doll. He hit the asphalt hard, the grit scraping his cheek, the taste of oil and blood filling his mouth. "Benjamin Okeke?" the leader asked, his voice devoid of inflection. It wasn't a question, it was a confirmation of the target. "Yes," Benjamin wheezed, trying to shield his head as a boot pressed down on his shoulder, pinning him to the burning tarmac. "Secure him. The chief is waiting." They hauled him up and threw him into the back of the rear SUV, jamming a hood over his head. Darkness swallowed him instantly, smelling of leather and gun oil. As the vehicle roared to life, sirens blaring to part the traffic, Benjamin didn't pray for his own life. His thoughts raced to Grace. If they had found him this quickly, it meant she had broken. They had squeezed the truth out of her, and now he was being delivered to the bulldozer not as a guest, but as debris to be cleared from the site. The ride was mercifully brief, a blur of speed and siren blasts that cut through the congestion of the island. When the vehicle finally stopped, Benjamin heard the thick thud of a specialized gate sealing behind them, the sound of entering an entirely different republic. His captors pulled the suffocating hood from his head, allowing the night air, now surprisingly crisp and scented with sea salt and exotic blossoms, to rush over his sweaty face. He found himself in a vast, manicured compound where every blade of grass seemed to be standing at attention. He was shoved through a massive, ornate front door into a foyer so expansive it felt like an aircraft hangar. The floor was polished, seamless travertine marble that reflected the glow of a colossal crystal chandelier hanging 50 feet above. The air inside was chilled, a stark contrast to the boiling heat of the streets, and it smelled of antiseptic cleaning agents and new leather. Benjamin's dirt-stained, crumpled shirt and trousers seemed offensively loud against the backdrop of this silent, immaculate opulence. He was escorted past several intimidating men in dark suits, their movements practiced and ghost-like, speaking volumes about the constant surveillance within the walls. Finally, he was propelled into a study that was less a workplace and more a hall of power. The walls were lined floor to ceiling with dark mahogany paneling and shelved with leather-bound books that looked utterly untouched. Behind a gargantuan desk, carved from a single slab of what looked like ebony, sat Chief Badmus. The chief was not just imposing, he was immense, filling the space like a seated monarch. He was dressed in an impeccable, blindingly white agbada of pristine hand-stitched silk lace, his face a mask of cold, unyielding judgment. He didn't look angry, he looked disappointed, which was infinitely more terrifying. On the desk between them lay a thin manila folder, slightly open, revealing a familiar, blurry photograph, Benjamin's face, captured on the streets. The dossier. The chief remained absolutely still, watching Benjamin with predatory patience, allowing the silence to stretch and crackle between them. Benjamin realized he wasn't facing a man, he was facing an empire. Every ounce of his defiance evaporated under that silent gaze. He dropped immediately to his knees, his hands resting on the cold marble, not because he was told to, but because it felt like the only appropriate posture before such overwhelming authority. He lowered his gaze, staring at the dust motes he had tracked onto the flawless floor, preparing to beg for his life and the life of his unborn child. The heavy silence of the study was abruptly cleaved by a sound that made Benjamin flinch, the deep, ragged inhalation of Chief Badmus. The bulldozer lifted the manila folder, his immense thumb pressing against the laminated paper, not turning to the sections detailing Grace's pregnancy or Benjamin's lineage, but to a police report tucked near the back. He read the contents aloud, his voice starting as a dry whisper, gradually gaining a tremor. 3 years ago, September 14th, Lekki Phase 1 Junction. Elderly male, disoriented, found wandering without identity, suffering from heat exhaustion and extreme dehydration. The chief paused, swallowing hard, the powerful muscles in his jaw working beneath the white lace. The report states he was taken to the station by an anonymous citizen, a young man who shared his provisions and refused payment. The only descriptive detail, a distinctive, jagged scar on the left hand. Benjamin, still pressed against the flawless marble, felt a cold dread seize his chest. 3 years ago, he was still a fresh graduate, idealistic and desperately seeking contract work, driving for a brief stint before the owner took the vehicle back. He remembered finding an old man near his bus one blazing hot afternoon, muttering confused phrases about missing cement orders. The man had looked lost, and Benjamin had done the only thing instinct allowed. He bought him water, a small packet of biscuits, and drove him to the nearest station, convinced he was leaving the man in safety. Chief Badmus let the folder fall to the desk with a soft thump. The sound echoed like a gunshot. He stared across the room, past Benjamin, into a private vault of agony. His breath hitched, transforming into a wrenching, guttural sob that seemed too large for the elegant room, too human for the feared tycoon. Tears, fat and hot, traced channels down his rigid cheeks, quickly soaking into the crisp fabric of his expensive handkerchief. He slowly rose from his powerful chair, his eyes locked on Benjamin's left hand, which he instinctively used to steady himself on the ground. The jagged white line of the scar was undeniable. Then, with agonizing slowness that belied his massive physical presence, Chief Badmus lowered his body. He did not ask Benjamin to rise. He brought himself down, his knees meeting the cold marble with a dull, muffled sound, right in front of the astonished young man. The great Chief Badmus, the man who crushed rivals with a single phone call, was not preparing an execution. He was offering a confession of profound debt. Chief Badmus remained humbled on the cold marble, a picture of immense power brought low by an immutable law of fate. His voice, now gravely and thick with grief, was addressed to the floor, yet every syllable reverberated through the silent room. My father, he passed away 6 months after that day. He had been an eccentric man, always distrustful of those who sought only capital and status. But the last months of his life, after that terrifying ordeal, fundamentally changed him. He was obsessed with finding the one soul who showed him unconditional dignity when he was powerless. The chief finally looked up at Benjamin, his expression a bewildering mix of sorrow and astonished gratitude. My lawyers searched every police station, every local authority, but the report was thin. We had almost given up. He gestured toward the ebony desk. My father's will was legally ironclad, but he included a sealed, private codicil. A mandate that no lawyer could violate. It stipulated that his final bequest, an amount that accounts for 50% of the entire Badmus consolidated fortune, was to be held in trust. Benjamin, still frozen in his fearful posture, could only stare, the reality of what he was hearing too surreal to grasp. The chief struggled to his feet, motioning for Benjamin to finally rise from the floor. He didn't offer a hand, recognizing that the young man's dignity must now be self-reasserted. Benjamin slowly stood, dusting the grime from his borrowed shirt, suddenly realizing he was standing eye to eye with the man who was moments ago his executioner. The language of the codicil, Chief Badmus continued, his voice heavy with the realization of the profound irony, was precise. It stated, "Half of my estate goes to the young driver with the scar on his left hand who saved me when I was nothing but a confused old man to him." We only had the description of the hand. You, Benjamin, were found tonight because you committed the crime of loving my daughter and getting her pregnant. Yet, the pregnancy brought you directly to the door we have been praying for 3 years would open. He shook his head, a genuine, bewildered smile finally touching his lips. You were delivered to me not as an intruder, but as the long-lost beneficiary of billions of naira. Chief Badmus lifted an immense, polished bronze hand from his desk and pressed an intercom button discreetly embedded in the wood. "Send my daughter in and call Mr. Dyke. Immediately. Tell him to bring the codicil files and prepare the necessary equity transfer documents." His tone was no longer that of a judge, but of a man managing a sudden, seismic reorganization. Moments later, the study door swung open, and Grace was ushered in by a grim-faced woman. Grace's eyes, red and swollen from crying, immediately locked onto Benjamin. When she saw him whole, standing, and not lying broken, a gasp of pure, raw relief tore from her throat. She ran across the room, ignoring the two powerful men, and threw herself into his arms. The embrace was desperate, a silent testament to the fear they had both endured, confirming the depth of their bond. Chief Badmus cleared his throat, allowing the young lovers their moment before stepping in to manage the transition. "Grace," he said, his voice unusually gentle, "Benjamin did not come here for judgment. He came here by divine mandate. This child you carry," he tapped the now-closed dossier, "is not a scandal. It is the vessel of destiny." He quickly recounted the story of his father's search and the legal documents that designated Benjamin, the man they tried to eliminate, as the principal beneficiary of the family fortune. The change in the environment was immediate and overwhelming. When the family solicitor, a nervous man named Mr. Dyke, arrived 20 minutes later, he treated Benjamin with the utmost deference, bowing slightly as he confirmed the legality of the grandfather's final wishes. Benjamin was no longer the homeless driver. He was the sudden, immense shareholder, the co-owner of the Badmus empire. The security detail that had dragged him through the glass window now stood at the door, awaiting his instruction. Benjamin looked from the grandfather's official documents, which detailed assets across multiple continents, to Grace, whose hand was still tightly clasped in his. He realized the weight of the moment. He had just gained immeasurable affluence, not through deceit or aggression, but through a simple, forgotten act of humanity years ago. The world had inverted for him, yet his first true thought was not of the assets, but of the Danfo bus, still impounded on a distant street, and the friends sleeping on the worn upholstery. A week after the revelation, the opulent silence of the mansion had been replaced by the measured chaos of logistics. Benjamin now occupied a guest wing that overlooked the Atlantic, his clothes replaced by tailor-made silk shirts, yet the quiet dignity he carried remained unchanged. He sat at the main dining table, a reflective, polished surface long enough to host a small conference, while Chief Badmus briefed him on the inner workings of the Badmus Group. The only source of tension was Grace's mother, Mrs. Badmus, a woman whose entire identity revolved around the Lagos social register. She watched Benjamin with undisguised contempt, her perfectly composed face betraying her silent fury that her daughter's high-stakes matrimony was to a former Danfo driver. "The legal handover is complete," Chief Badmus announced, spreading a corporate ledger across the table. "You are now, by legal mandate, the majority equity holder in the Transport and Logistics Division. However, we need a swift union. The pregnancy and the wealth transfer must be sealed by marriage before the media smells blood." Mrs. Badmus finally spoke, her voice brittle and sharp as shattered glass. "The shame. A court wedding within 3 weeks? It's unthinkable. What will society say about my daughter's haste?" Benjamin set down the corporate documents he had been reviewing. He met Mrs. Badmus's gaze, not with defiance, but with calm authority. "They will say she married the man who loves her and saved her family's name," he stated simply, before turning back to the chief. "Chief, I have reviewed the pending files for the Lagos Island redevelopment project. Specifically, the eviction notice served to the traders in the Idemota market area." The chief waved a dismissing hand. "That is standard procedure, my son. We need the land for the new commercial skyscraper. They have been compensated." "Not fairly," Benjamin countered, tapping the file. "The compensation offered for their stalls is a pittance that guarantees they become street beggars. My grandfather's mandate wasn't to enrich us through the pauperization of others. That stalls project is cancelled. We will restructure the design, retain the market, and build vertically over them. Those traders deserve a chance to continue their hustle." He looked at the chief, his voice firm. "That is my first command as the new equity principal. I will not have my name associated with displacing the very people I came from." The chief, momentarily stunned by the audacity and the unexpected ethical framework, slowly smiled. He saw not an intruder, but a principled successor. Mrs. Badmus sputtered, silenced not by fear of the chief, but by the immovable legal weight now represented by the former driver. For months after the tense boardroom meeting, the Badmus estate was transformed into a carnival of high society celebration. The court wedding had been swift and discreet, but the subsequent traditional ceremony was an extravagant affair designed to signal the union of Grace and Benjamin to the world, erasing all whispers of scandal. Grace, radiant in bespoke gold lace, and Benjamin, sharp in an immaculate agbada, were the picture of a destined match. The chief, beaming and finally at peace, raised a toast, recognizing Benjamin not just as his son-in-law, but as the man whose ethical compass now navigated the family's future. The true transformation arrived a few weeks later with the birth of their son, Olusegun. The child, healthy and vibrant, solidified the familial bond and marked the final, joyful completion of the grandfather's unexpected mandate. With his position as a primary custodian secured, Benjamin did not indulge in frivolous spending or retreat into the insulated world of the super-affluent. He took charge of the logistics arm of the Badmus Group and initiated an entrepreneurial revolution. His first major project was the creation of the Golden Fleet, a modernized transport initiative that saw the immediate retirement of the city's decrepit, polluting buses. Benjamin utilized his intimate, ground-level knowledge of Lagos traffic flow and established the most efficient, technologically advanced transit network the city had ever seen. Crucially, he did not treat his former companions as candidates for low-wage labor. Instead, he summoned the community of motor park hustlers and mechanics, the men who had shown him camaraderie in the depths of his poverty. Benjamin offered them partnership. His friends, the men who once slept crammed on torn upholstery, were given opportunities not as hired drivers, but as operations managers and part owners in the new vehicle fleet. He provided vocational training, fair profit-sharing agreements, and a pathway to true dignity. Benjamin, the graduate who couldn't secure a job, had used a massive inheritance rooted in a single act of kindness to empower hundreds of others, lifting an entire segment of the city's struggling workforce alongside him. He had fulfilled his grandfather-in-law's ultimate wish, establishing a legacy based on the nobility of character, proving that the most valuable asset in the Badmus empire was not its real estate, but the heart of the former homeless driver. Please, kindly hit the subscribe button, like this video and share. This means a lot to us. Thank you for watching.